The country's energy sector has been under immense pressure. Years of load shedding, faltering infrastructure, and a power utility, Eskom, struggling to keep the lights on. These challenges have not only left homes in the dark, but also slowed down industries and threatened economic stability. Now, a major intervention is on the horizon. The African Development Bank has greenlit a $475 million loan, roughly about 7.5 billion rand, to overhaul our energy and transport networks. This funding promises to ease Eskom's power crisis, unclog our busiest ports, and modernize the railway system that keeps our economy moving. So let's talk to two experts that are going to weigh in on that. I'll be joined now by Karabo Mokgonyana on Eskom's challenges, as well as Dr. Azar Jammine, who will share insights on this investment and how it can reshape our country's economy. Let me start with you, Dr. Jammine. It seems to me that this has come in rapid succession, the loan from the African Development Bank, with another one recently announced by the World Bank. Tell me what's happening here in relation to our network and pipeline industries, and why there seems to be this momentum coming through these loans to address particularly issues of Eskom, as well as the logistics sector.
One has to recognize that one of the primary reasons in the short term for why South Africa's economic growth performance has been so poor, with less than 1% growth, we are lagging behind most major economies of the world. And there are two obvious reasons. There are many structural reasons underlying all this, but the more obvious manifestations of those are in the form of insufficient energy and electricity, the fact that we had load shedding for so many years. And secondly, and this is not going away right now, we've got port and rail logistics problems. Our ports have been classified as the worst in terms of efficiency in the world, and our railway ability to transport goods and services and people through our railways has declined by some 30-40% over the last 7-8 years. And there's a fundamental reason for this, and that is insufficient maintenance work on the infrastructure of those activities. And so money coming from firstly the World Bank and now the African Development Bank, amounting to nearly $2 billion, or as you mentioned, around 35 billion rand, is very welcome, because otherwise the burden would have fallen on the state to fund that, and the state is very short of money. And furthermore, the funds that come from the World Bank and the African Development Bank come at a lower interest cost than would have been the case if the government had to go to the market to borrow the money itself. We're talking here about 2.5-3% difference in interest rates, which on 35 billion rand amount to almost R1 billion savings on interest per year.
Yeah.
So it's a logical thing, and I think we need to be very grateful that we're getting that money. The big question is, will that money be spent appropriately or not? Or will it be siphoned into corrupt activities which have already deprived these institutions of vital capital over the last 15 years that should have been devoted to infrastructure and maintenance, and weren't because they instead lined the pockets of the Guptas and others. And we have seen the outcome of that in the form of load shedding and a deterioration in our ports and rail network.
So, Dr. Jammine, you laid out nicely for me. Karabo, let me then ask you, if what Dr. Jammine talks to doesn't happen, the siphoning of these monies through corruption and diverting of the money, what's the need objectively that needs to be addressed in as far as entities like Eskom are concerned? What's the potential of the difference that this money can make?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tulasizwe. And good afternoon to your viewers. I think this loan, let me just start by saying that this loan is part of an international financing package holistically for South Africa. So it's not just the Africa Development Bank loan and the World Bank loan, but there's also another 591 that's been, sought from the German Development Bank, but there's also another one from the Japan International Cooperation as well, but also opaque Fund for International Development. So it seems that there's really an urgency for finances in terms of these particularly Eskom and Transnet in relation to our infrastructure and energy system. I think this is an opportunity for us to, if strategically deployed, to get us to a point whereby energy and transport management is better even without these loans. So we are able to really manage and deal with these things effectively. So it really needs to go into addressing some of the key issues that plague these different institutions. So your grid infrastructure upgrades and your maintenance needs to be a priority, but we also need to see a strengthening and developing of the generation, transmission, and distribution entities that the Eskom Amendment Act was trying to actually develop. We're still seeing a slow development of those three entities. We need to then have technical assistance to help coordinate between municipalities, state-owned enterprises, and even national government, because that discoordination between these three really causes a big issues, and that's why we even still see the municipal arrear debts that still have become an issue till this day, but also setting up financial recovery. So for me, it's going to be important for Eskom to set up financial recovery because Eskom is in debt, and getting more debt to then elevate the issues that we have could be quite problematic, and we need to make sure that this money from these development banks is utilized to put us in a better position to be able to deal with the issues ourselves, because more debt from external and foreign entities into a country where we're already into an indebted institution already is quite problematic, and I think we really need to use this money to help us be prepared to deal with the issues ourselves.
So let me stick with you then, Karabo, and ask you, just from the energy perspective, does this suggest, because I was looking at this document from the African Development Bank, this is part of what they're calling the Infrastructure Governance and Green Growth Program, and it mentions specifically the just energy transition. Is this to suggest that the just energy transition, to the extent that some may have believed that it may be slacking off a bit or falling by the wayside in terms of attention and focus, that remains firmly in focus and it's part of the core policies in as far as energy security is concerned?
It absolutely is. I mean, we obviously had the United States withdraw from the JET-P, which is the JET partnership. So this also really helps in filling that gap that the United States has actually left. So the conversation on just transitions is definitely back from a financial, from a climate finance perspective. And I think that's a great thing. But it also really opens up. I think we need to start viewing the just transition as an opportunity for green industrialization. We have the critical minerals strategy on the table, which is also another opportunity for our economy and our country, but also the conversation on renewable energy and making sure that we have it for energy access, energy sovereignty, but also getting, our economy really advanced in terms of we have an ability to, generate a surplus of renewable energy, not just for our economies, but for export reasons. And I think we really do need to view this as an opportunity and strategically utilize this money to move our economy further in terms of the green economy.
Yeah. Dr. Jammine, someone watching this at home may be thinking, hang on. Didn't we say that we are overly indebted already as a country? What's the calculus here? What's the calculus here? Do we calculate the benefits that we envisage from loans such as these, that they will outweigh and be worth the sacrifice that says take more loans if what we are purchasing will actually help us dig ourselves out of this rut that we're in as far as economic growth goes?
Tulasizwe, I think you have answered the question with your preamble here. And yes, absolutely, we are looking to derive benefits from these that outweigh the costs. A lot of a problem, one mustn't see debt as a unitary unit. There are debts that are used badly, and there are debts that are used effectively. And the hope is that this debt will be used effectively. The other aspect that I didn't mention that is of a great benefit is that they are relatively long-term debts. And the government has been inclined in recent years to have to borrow money on a fairly short-term basis because short-term interest rates have been much lower than long-term interest rates. So these institutional loans actually spread out the maturity spectrum of our debt so that the risk of having to repay that debt all at once is minimized, and it goes over a long period of time, over which time period one hopes that these funds will be utilized appropriately, and that by the time that we have to repay these debts in 10 to 15 years' time, we will be generating a lot of benefits that can be used to help fund the repayment of those debts.
All right, I've got to thank the both of you for your time and your insights this afternoon. That's Dr. Azar Jammine, who is Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics, as well as Karabo Mokgonyana, an energy expert.